to the Cape Cod Technology Council Coffee Q&A. I'm Bert Jackson. I am the CEO of the Cape Cod Technology Council. I want to welcome you all here today. Very pleased to have Dr. Roger Landry with us. Very excited to hear what he's got to talk about in terms of aging and technology. Today, I'm really pleased that Dr. Jane Ward, one of our board members, is going to be moderating our event today. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jane Ward. Jane.
Thank you, Bert. And it's really exciting for me to be able to introduce and lead this discussion with Dr. Roger Landry. I first heard Roger speak sometime this summer. He was being interviewed by Mindy Todd on WCAI. And the more he talked, the more I said to myself, I must know him. And my husband and I were both Air Force physicians. We followed in his footsteps at many of the same assignments about 10 years later. And so I felt like somewhere along the line, we must have met each other. And when it was an opportunity to suggest him as a local speaker, I said, this guy's terrific. And have had a chance to get to know him on the telephone. But I'm not going to go into a lot about his background. I just want to introduce the fact that he is, since his Air Force career finished about, 30 years ago, I guess, Roger, he's been focused on helping seniors, and particularly in senior living communities, take charge of their health and live a longer, healthier life. And during the pandemic, as most of you realize, our seniors have really taken the biggest hit. I'm going to put a few slides up and just show you, and if in case you haven't been aware of it, how much of a hit the pandemic has been for seniors. For those 50 years or older in the US, they're only 35% of the population, but 94% of COVID deaths, and those over 85 even more so. And here's a wonderful graph that really hits you in the face that CDC updates periodically, like at least weekly, that shows that only 2% of the population is over 85, but 30% of the deaths from COVID. And if you go back to 50 years old and add all these up, that's where you get the 94%. So Roger has really, he's built a terrific company and group of partners that have worked with the senior living centers and have used technology along the way, but even more so this year as a critical tool to help seniors get through this pandemic as optimally as they can. And he's going to discuss a lot more of that. I'm not going to take any more time other than I was thrilled to hear him talking about preventive medicine and the fact that we have, for the most part, the biggest influence on how our senior years will turn out. So I'm going to back off with the slides, I hope, if I can get rid of them. Stop share and turn it over to Roger. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. It was good to hear your voice and get reacquainted. I think we did work out where we did cross paths, but thank you all for this invitation. At first I said, technology and me, well, if I try to give you anything really heavy in technology, I think it's probably going to be like bringing Budweiser to Bavaria. But you all have a pulse, and I do have a message for all of you. But in that message is an observation as to what's happened in this last year and a half, almost 2 years, and what kind of opportunities that presents for technology of almost any type. So that's my goal, and I wanna do it with as soon as I can share my slide here. I want to do it in such a way that it's going to be of value to you personally, hopefully professionally, and spread the word. So unfortunately, this graph represents how most people, not this one, the one next before it. Let me get back to that one. Jumped ahead. There it is. There's the graph that represents how most of us age. Unfortunately, we're living longer, that's for sure. We have a longevity dividend, but there's no guarantee of the quality of that. And people can spend a huge amount of time in this particular curve representative, that would be half their time in some sort of challenge or decline, which is expensive, certainly a lower quality of life, not something we'd really want. And so there really has to be a better way. And here it is. This graph here represents, the dotted line represents it's not only a concept, but it's something that's been observed by research. And that is that people can stay at high levels of performance, even if it's not the top there, they just don't just totally decline. And they can keep a level of performance, quality of life up until the very end. I wrote a book called Live Long, Die Short. That's what this is about. It's not about dying short of stature. It's about dying quickly. And you can see, even when life throws you the curveball, that little dip that you're seeing there, that these people are able to bounce back. Ashley Montague said it very well. He recommended that we die young as late as possible. That's what we're talking about here. In public health, we call this the compression of morbidity. Morbidity is when we're sick and impaired, and we want to compress the time that we are sick and impaired. Now, I promise you, this is all going to lead to technology. Now, we know that we can do that. As Jane has already alluded to, we have learned, starting with the MacArthur Foundation 10-year-long study in the 80s, we learned that lifestyle is the major determinant in how we age, not genes, lifestyle. Up to 70% of how we age is determined by the choices we make every day. That was new. It smashed stereotypes. And it really started a wealth of research, which has all validated that concept. You may have heard of the blue zones. This is an area, these are areas of the world where Dan Buettner was an author and a PhD but he started as an author with National Geographic. And he wanted to write a piece on where do people live to be very old, but are very vital. And he found 6 areas in the world, and Cape Cod wasn't one of them. But the fact is, in these areas, some of them were not a surprise, because the lifestyle was more like how we have lived most of the time we've been on Earth, islands and that sort of thing, Okinawa, Costa Rica, an island in Greece. But there was one in Loma Linda, California, which was a shock. Southern California, are you kidding me? Well, there they found there's a large contingent of Seventh-day Adventists, and they live this lifestyle also. What is the lifestyle? People move. They don't exercise, they move. Movement is in the culture. It's in their daily life. It is not something that they program for an hour and then go sit in a cubicle or drive a car, sit in a sofa, whatever, for the rest of the day. We are a sedentary society. Most of the time we've been on Earth, we were hunter-gatherers, and we moved. And we did all of these things that I'm going to talk about you in Blue Zone. So this should not be a surprise. Strong social network. We wouldn't have survived as a species had we not banded together. It was a rough neighborhood, and we wouldn't have made it. It is very, very strong in our DNA to be connected socially. The pace was slower. There was no such thing as time. It was sunrise, sunset, seasons, that sort of thing. And we are not geared up for the pace of life that we now live. I mean, we got to live it. We're not going to change things, but we need adaptations in order to manage the stress that this pace of life has produced in us. And we, up to 80% of medical visits have some sort of stress involved in it. Mediterranean diet is what we ate most of the times: fruits, nuts, vegetables, wild grains, fish, and small amounts of meat. That's what we ate most of the time. So no surprise, that's the diet that we do best on. Really, it's not a surprise. Everyone had a role, with kids, older adults, but particularly older adults. You can see down below there, they were considered, and still are in some of these, in blue zones, cultural treasures. Cultural treasures. Not many of us feel like cultural treasures these days in our world, in our society, but they are there. They're expected to give back. They do give back. They're not only revered, but they're expected to guide the society. And again, this is how it's been for 99% of the time we've been on Earth. A relationship with nature, which is not one of visiting or observing or say, oh, how nice it is. We were nature. We share like 25% of our DNA with a daffodil. And as we go up trees to 50, 60, mammals, 70, 80, and bonobo apes, you don't want to know how much we share with bonobo apes. I thought you two would like, this group would particularly like the next two slides. Elizabeth Blackburn won the Nobel Prize for her work on telomeres. Telomeres are the little tips on our chromosomes, sort of like the ends of shoelaces to protect the chromosome during cell division. And what she has found is that people who live the lifestyle, like the blue zones, like we're going to be talking about, and like MacArthur found, these telomeres stay longer. So the cell stays younger longer, the organism stays longer. Amazing stuff. And then there's a whole new field of epigenetics. This is, as the Time article says here, this is a field of study that shows that a lifestyle can influence the expression of genes. So you can have a bad gene, and now we can map the genome, spit in a jar, and they can map your genome, and they can find some bad genes. But studies that they have done on people with these bad genes and those, and living two different lifestyles show that those who live a lifestyle that we're talking about, moving, learning, socially connected, meaning and purpose, as we'll be talking about, that gene is less likely to express itself. Incredible stuff. So this is all about resilience, because life's going to throw things at you, and luck, serendipity, maybe they play a little role, but it's mostly about the fact that life's going to throw these curveballs at you, and are you going to have the resilience? How do you build that resilience? Well, what research says, this is in my book, but this is from huge amount of research on my part, but all the studies sent MacArthur have validated it also. So why don't we go through it? But first of all, any of you who want to jump and change things, New Year's resolution, I'm going to use 57 pounds by February 1st, which is unfortunately how we usually approach change. The approach that is most successful comes from Japan. Actually came from Deming, who visited Japan, told them about it, but they kept it where we didn't. Japan uses it for organizational change, but also for personal change. And it's about small steps, small doable steps that lead to bigger goals. But the goal is usually the next step. Walk 10 more paces, walk 100 more steps, spit out the first bite of a candy bar. Small steps that lead to bigger goals. That's how you make change in lifestyle that's always successful. Just ratchet back if you didn't make it, and is durable. So remember that as we think about all this. Okay, let's get started. Use it or lose it. This is not a surprise. You can't expect to be doing things that you don't use all the time. We don't choose not to do things, but life throws us one of those curveballs, and we're not in a place where we can accommodate, or we're not in the emotional state to accommodate it, and we start this decline. I myself had an injury in college, did pretty well until about my 50s. And then I started to really go down physically. My knee and ankle were worn out. I was able to fix the knee, not the ankle, and emotionally and psychologically and professionally, I just started circling the drain, physically, everything. And, I guess I would have ultimately accommodated to do what I could do. But luckily, I found that the surgeon who fixes the ankles of the Celtics replaces ankles. So I got to replace my ankle, and everything went the other way. So, but it's a matter of accommodation as life throws you curveballs. So moving, as I said, critical. Mayo Clinic paper from 2 or 3 years ago. The title, Sitting is the New Smoking. And he did all the work. That sedentary lifestyle, which unfortunately most of us live today in our, as judged by the Surgeon General, is associated with more risk of death, of chronic disease, than is smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. It was huge. But again, as in the blue zones, this has to be a cultural thing. Parking further, using stairs, walking as you talk on the cell phone, and scheduling exercise. Sure, that's good, but it has to be much more than that. Because just a little bit of exercise, an hour, even 2 hours a day, where the rest of the day is mostly sitting, not going to work. Well, it will work, but not as well as you would like. The brain, same thing. Nola here is a icon because she got her degree at 95. And what she knew is what I didn't learn. Jane probably didn't even learn it later on in medical school, about neoplasticity. This is the lifelong the ability of the brain to rewire itself in response to an injury, sickness, or what we ask our brain to do. So remember, this is lifelong. So we're really the architects of our brain. And how do we do that? How do we grow this new brain tissue? Well, the short of it is that we have to move because we have to get blood up there. But additionally, we have to learn new things. We don't have to win gold medals to do this. So forget that. Just challenge yourself by learning new things. You know, we can scan brains now. We can see brains getting bigger and bigger as someone learns a language or an instrument or a skill. But even with smaller things, you know, eat with the opposite hand, you know, put on your makeup, start the other side of your face, shave from the opposite side of your face, go scare yourself sometime, get lost, forget the GPS, get lost and find it and find yourself. All of these things, just get out of your comfort zone. These things are very, very healthy for the brain. Social connection, this one is big, and this one relative to technology and what we're talking about is huge. We are social creatures. We're meant to be social. We have to be social. Yeah, I know people are annoying. Yeah, they are. And but you can't live without them. It is just who we are. And those who are socially isolated have anywhere from 2 to 5 times more risk of developing all the big serious illnesses: dementia, heart disease, cancer. It doesn't focus in on one. So that it is a broad need that we have to be. My friend, this is a great quote here. I have a friend, by the way, who was shot down in Vietnam. You may know him, Jane. I won't mention his name. He was a prisoner for 7 years, and he was tortured and in solitary, a good part of that. And he told me in private, he said, I actually look forward to when they would come get me to bring me to get tortured, because humans would come into my solitary, they would touch me, we could talk, we'd go down. I didn't like the torturing, but it was less painful than being alone. This is not who we are. Risks, you know, we can't ignore risks. You know, you can put your head in the ground like an ostrich, it's not going to work. And we can do so much with the knowledge we have and the technology we have in medicine that we can do things. You know, my father died of colon cancer, so I'm at higher risk. So every 5 years, when the guy chases me with a 6-foot snake, I let him find me. Because you know what? I won't die of colon cancer. I may get it, but I won't die because it's a slow grower, it's detectable, and it's treatable. And so it's a matter of managing your risk. There's another source of risk, though, that can come from others. And you shouldn't let others, that could be society, that could be your family, put you at risk. We see this a lot. And that, you know, especially with people who live with their families, because they love you so much, they want to make you a bubble person. You have to grow in order to see that graph, to experience that graph, to compress your morbidity and have healthy longevity. You have to continue to grow. The default position is decline. No Pollyanna about that. So continuing to grow is how we get that resilience, and we're able to take that higher road to aging. So they love you, but, you know, a guy told me after a talk, he says, we just celebrated my mother's 90th birthday and she was late, and we had something in the yard and we started calling hospitals, and she comes down in a parachute. She didn't ask her kids whether that was a good idea. You know, this is about never acting your age. Society there's a stereotype that we have very low expectations of older adults, and the worst repository for that is in the older adults themselves. It's changing, but it's huge. And as Michelangelo says here, this is a killer. When your expectations are low, that's probably the mark you're going to hit. You know, Thoreau said, you never hit what you don't aim at. And Michelangelo says it even better. This is about being present. This is about stress. And as I alluded to earlier, this is the plague of our times. Our lifestyle, we are ill-equipped for the lifestyle that we have developed. Again, we're not going to change that lifestyle, but what we need to do is to seek some refuge, even if just for short times. This comes from our fight or flight mechanism. You know, it's meant to keep us alive. But with our brains now, humans, we can set off that response, that fight or flight response, which is meant to be all or nothing and meant for us to do something. We can set it off so that it's chronic and it rots us from within. As I said, stress is related to almost every single disease that we have, making it worse or actually causing it. Plus, there's a lower quality of life, lower relationships. So what do? Well, I usually ask audiences if there's any artists in the group, and usually someone raises their hand. I said, so what happens to time when you're doing your art? No time. It goes away. How do you feel? I feel wonderful. I feel happy. I feel joyful. It's a time-related thing. We were not meant to be time-based beings, and time is sort of it's not only a symptoms, it's a cause in many cases of stress. And I got to tell you, technology has a role in this. Technology, can have a dark side. It's as great as it is and all it can do. It can also cause huge amounts of stress. And so we have to be aware of that. And so how do you do? Well, like the person who does art, nature, I think many of us have found it in this last 2 years, those things that bring us some peace, whether it's being with a pet, whether it's walking in nature, whether it's reading, whether it's meditating. We have to do it to stop the momentum that otherwise gets exponential and eats us. Your purpose, everyone needs a purpose. Mary Oliver, poet from Massachusetts, passed now though. What is going to do with this one wild and precious life? Because without purpose, we wither. And I got to tell you, purpose usually involves other living things, people, plants, pets, the environment. There's a guy in Australia, the oldest guy in Australia, and he's 108, and he gets up every day and he knits sweaters for penguins, brightly colored sweaters, who have been exposed to oil spills. They can't preen their feathers, they can't ingest the oil, and they survive, and they look great. Whatever it is, only you can tell it. No one else can tell you what is going to get you out of bed, but you need that. Kids are an intergenerational experience, absolutely critical. We have it until later on in life. Get more and more everybody watch this. And we get more and more isolated. And that, as we're going to talk about in just a minute, and what we've seen during COVID is deadly. Dostoevsky said the soul is healed by being with children, but an intergenerational experience is really what we're looking for. And humor and laughter. People who are half full type of people, they live 7.5 years longer. Those who are half empty. Imagine that. And by definition, it's a higher quality, more enjoyable form of life. So Norman Cousins cured terminal illness with laughter. And even through this COVID time, I think there are things that we can look at that were positive about this. Yes, positive. Certainly not if you lost a loved one and that sort of thing, but there were things that shook us up as a race, and almost like 9/11. And hopefully, unlike 9/11, that we can hold on to this, and you and technology can capitalize on it and develop technology that's going to be able to facilitate this lifestyle, because this is really what we need. It's in the book, but this is very similar to hunter-gatherer ancestors to the blue zones. All research has validated this. So anything that you can do with technology to do this is beautiful. And so we work with senior living communities for 20 years in order to create a culture and tools and resources that they can follow their lifestyle. They can assess it. Actually, they have lots of programming, lots of content that they could use. And it was done usually in group settings and senior living. And it was great. That's really what we did. So we can't be on the fence about this as a society or as individuals. It's absolutely critical. It's do or don't do, like Yoda says, because we can chart our own path, and we can do this as a society as we look at healthcare costs and an aging population. It's very, very critical. We don't want to be like these guys, because we don't want to miss the boat, because it's too big for society and one of us. We have to be connected. We have to be active, both physically and mentally, and we have to be fulfilled with meaning and purpose. And we have to continue growing. So that's what we were doing in our company and all those in aging services in order to make life better and seek a healthy longevity. And then, as Jane showed you, there's one of her slides, but what happened was, when we didn't know what all this was, and all of a sudden we had the most vulnerable, with the statistics that you saw, dying at rates that were just frightening, and usually brought in by workers or visitors. But these people were very susceptible. And so senior living responded by shutting down, basically creating cells for all prison cells for all of their residents. They were terrified. They didn't know what to do. Public health in some cases were supporting it, but because until we got tests, and then until we got vaccines, there was nothing much we can do. We all got locked down. Well, older adults getting locked down had a horrible response to that. Not only did they die of COVID, but worse, there was huge accelerated decline in people who were, especially those who lived alone in apartments, but even with couples. This loneliness, this isolation was deadly, just as the research tells us that it is. They were not able to access, because of unfamiliarity or an illiteracy regarding technology, they weren't able to access content or messaging or connect with their families. And it was deadly. And there's no question in my mind that it was partly responsible for that death rate that we have seen. Certainly COVID was there, but they were much more susceptible to the virus, I believe, and a deadly response to the virus than otherwise, where someone who was a going concern, had a family, were able to get out in nature and do all those things, were much more resistant. So this was a deadly experience. And what happened? Technology exploded in a very short time with technology that would, well, first of all, Zoom and Skype, particularly Zoom, just blew up, and what also happened is that technology companies, and I can't tell you how many, there are 50, 60 new ones, and ways within senior living communities that people can keep connected to each other, to staff, to programming, to content, and to the world. And they're all over the place. Some are good, some are not so good, but with the idea of responding to this. So in my mind, the good things in this are that, one, a demographic that was not as literate in technology, they didn't grow up with it more than half their lives, they didn't even have cell phones or things that we take for granted. And they became much more literate and comfortable with what was provided to them. And secondly, as we look to the next pandemic, and it's coming, Stephen Hawking and another Nobel Prize laureate says the virus will ultimately wipe out our species. I'm a positive guy, but they're talking way down the road. But you could see how susceptible we are, and a virus that can change no matter what we do to do an end run around whatever we do, deadly. And so, but anyway, there probably will be another pandemic or something requiring this. Senior living communities getting ready for it, but technology ought to be continuing to answer the question, how can we deliver, how can we facilitate this lifestyle that is so healthy and results in healthy longevity to a population, not only in senior living, but a population, because most people live in their homes and get more and more isolated in their homes. In fact, we had many people say, I was very happy I was in senior living, because if I had been at home, it would have been really horrible. So with a demographic where we're rapidly reaching 25% of our population over 65, who can experience a healthy longevity if indeed they can move and learn and stay connected and have meaning and purpose. And the things that can get in the way of that, technology has the ability to overcome it. We've seen it to some extent, but I think there's even more that can, and we can do it in such a way that we avoid some of those dark tales of technology, which cause us, technology was always about to have more time to relax and enjoy each other. That never happened. All we did is pile more on our plate and attempt to do more and more, multitask and these sort of things. These are very, for most, very, very stressful and a negative health experience. Certainly lots of wonderful things. This is the last place I want to bash technology, but I think we have to be aware that we have to do this with the health and welfare of humans, real humans, as the outcome that we're looking at. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to assume that you were very attentive and that you're standing and applauding. But in any case, thank you very much. And I think it's time for us to have questions and thoughts and discussion.
Thank you very much, Roger. That was outstanding, and I am standing and applauding. Thank you. I love all your graphics, and I love the way your talk helps us laugh as we go along. And obviously, you must be an animal lover because that they featured well in your talk. And I love what you're talking about, because that's really been my passion the last 10 years. Is I've joined a group called Lifestyle Medicine, which is a splinter group of your preventive medicine group, but you were way ahead of us. So I love the optimism in the fact that we are in charge of how we live out our life. And I think we need to constantly cheer people on and explain to them how that happens. So I love what you've said. And I also find that the technology has been a two-edged sword. Just in my own experience, I think in some ways, the pandemic has allowed me to reconnect with people that I'd lost touch with, because I've joined so many Zoom groups and done some educating about staying safer during the pandemic by making your home safer or your place of business safer with air quality. But I've reconnected with friends. But on the same time, if you go down the rabbit hole of the Facebook isolation that we're hearing about being so destructive to our teens, that can be a problem. And if you can't get the technology to work, that can raise your stress. So I'm going to see if we have any questions in the chat, and if anybody else just wants to call out a question, go ahead and.
Hey Jane, it's Robin. How are you?
Good.
Hi Roger, nice to meet you. That was a great presentation. So we do have a couple of questions in the chat, and I'm gonna give you a few here.
Okay.
So number one is, could you just talk a little bit more about the specific technologies that you're referring to? What's the nature of them? I mean, are we talking about things like social apps like Slack? Are we talking about, tools that help them navigate the resources that they need to get to? Can you just address that a little bit?
Well, I will attempt to. I'm not a technology guy. I'm a lifestyle guy. But what we saw that worked was certainly stuff that was already there on the shelf, Zoom and Skype, which the ability to have people to be able to talk to each other. Texting eventually caught on, but it was a little while before that happened. Certainly the things like Facebook, not so much till very much later, and that was never really big. The many others that are there that usually are used by younger people never really did catch on. What was particularly of value, and what we have been working on even before the pandemic, was a way for us to deliver our content. Our content is about looking at the lifestyle holistically, physically, mentally, socially, regarding meaning and purpose, and taking into personal traits, so a way to evaluate someone by asking them questions, giving them feedback, and then offering content that was at many levels, many topics, many media. So fit the visual, the audio, we do podcasts, or the text. And so that what the new older adult wants, and what I'm sure you want, because they're very much like people decades younger than them, because they're getting more and more savvy, is not a one size fits all regarding their lifestyle. So something that will allow me to chart my own course, to be able to pick and choose, to be able to track it, and to be able to be aware of what's important and where I might be, a little bit not negligent, but not as putting as much time into one major area of my lifestyle. And then to answer the question, finally, I give it to you, all of you who know technology. And with the general challenge, what can you do with technology that would be adapted and older adult friendly, that can aid them in achieving these lifestyle traits, which result in a healthy longevity? And big among them, huge among them, is social connection, of course. We have lots of brain challenge things. We're not even sure about the research on how much those do help, but they certainly keep us busy. And meaning and purpose. And so some of them are right in text, bailiwick, but some are seem like stretches. But another one would be an intergenerational connection. Someone does very well, as you heard, when we are connected to the rest of society, when we act as older adults, act as mentors, guides, sources of wisdom. And to the extent that we can connect younger people and older people, there are pilot programs going on, still relatively small, but they are adapted. They are well received by both age groups. I'm not saying both, the huge younger age group, and elders find it as a source of purpose and meaning in their lives, and don't feel as marginalized as they have over the last decade or a century or so. So I hope that helps. I don't have specifics, but I'm relying upon all of you with your technology to come up with that.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to ask Jen Reed, our board president, has a great question. I'm going to ask Jen to unmute and ask that question live.
Thank you. Hi, Roger. As I mentioned, I'm the director of Bridgewater State's University Senior College, which is a non-credit enrichment learning program that just started in the fall of 2019. We've done a really good job with using technology. We were 100% on Zoom over the last few semesters with the pandemic. We have over 200 members, so it's been really successful for a brand new program. However, our members are almost exclusively white, and I would say probably somewhere in the space of being economically privileged. So do you have any recommendations for me as the administrator of the program, like how I can better reach out to community of color, socioeconomically diverse communities, communities that are, people might not have as much means. We do offer scholarships, so I'd be happy to, offer those liberally, but like who should I work with in those communities to reach people?
Wow, a challenge, but a noble one. Well, I think we've seen it in the military when we try to impose our culture on other cultures, how that is not successful, and try to make them in our likeness. That's not successful, and I think that's a general principle here as we look at this. There's a number of things. There's the culture, and what is it about the culture that may or may not, that is a barrier, and how might we overcome it? And I think we need to tap into the culture itself, experts within that culture who can work with us to help to take the wool from our eyes, so to speak, because many of us are blind to this. As noble as we are and as open-hearted as we are, we can miss it. The next is financial. I mean, the tech costs money. And it's not a huge amount for most of us, but it can be quite a barrier to many others. And so I know that there are grants and philanthropy and foundations out there who can help, but how do we get them engaged, and how do we get it distributed? I don't have the answers to that, but I think that those are key factors. I think that as with lifestyle change in general, the Kaizen approach, which is what I'm talking about, which is small steps, I think to have small successes that you can capitalize on with marketing can be a huge help. I would, if you can demonstrate something, however small, that this project worked, that's something to build on, to take the next step. And I think we need champions. We need celebrity champions, athletes, politicians. That's how things work today. Not so much financially, although that would be nice, but from the point of view of this is important, and to overcome some of those cultural barriers that may be there. Those are just a few, Jen. I kudos to what you're doing. If you ever want to reach out to me, any help, if I can be of help, I would be happy to.
Thank you. That gave me some really great things to think about. You know, like our instructors aren't reflective of the communities that I'm trying to reach. So, you know, I need to work on that to, you know, address those cultural issues that you talked about. So thank you so much. Gave me a lot to think about.
Roger, we had another question that's pretty interesting. I think a lot of people don't understand that lifestyle can impact our genes. And one of our questions is, can we do some of these self-gene testing products where you spit in a tube and mail it in and determine your genes, but then try to, I think the question is, try to monitor how do our lifestyle choices change the expression of those genes. Do you have any comments on that area? I think that's very interesting, that epigenetics.
It certainly is, and optimistic and empowering. You know, you can do. You can map your own genome. Be ready to take some potentially bad news that you want to carry around with you at a time when there's not a whole lot we can do as far as do this and this will happen. Now, there's some major frontline research where I've forgotten her name, but a major scientist in the US is, or Britain, is actually experimenting with removing bad genes and replacing them with good genes. That is really way out there, and that's certainly not what's happening now, and I don't believe we have the capability to do that for anyone. So at this point in time, you can map your genome, but what we do know for sure, because we have done long-term studies, that living this lifestyle that we talk about, moving, learning, socially connected, meaning and purpose, certainly paying attention to things like diet and things, but those core ones that, you know, that we've talked about, that doing that has a profound effect upon the incidence and prevalence of chronic disease, and therefore must be, and now we know part of that is genetic. We don't know how much, but we know that it's possible, and we know it must be going on as part of it. Again, we don't know how much. So you're making a fine investment, even though you may not know the percentage of improvement it was due to this particular thing, but you're not wasting your time to move, learn, stay connected, have meaning and purpose, and pay attention to your lifestyle. So more to come on the genetic part. We're talking to some people in Silicon Valley, and they're doing some gee whiz stuff. Some of them are actually saying that we can live, 50 more years or forever. That certainly creates its own problems in the world population on the planet, and whether it's possible, whether we want to do it. And but there's lots of talk about this. So hang on to your hat. More to come.
Yeah, and I would say that in terms of finding your own genetic risks, there's even some ethical discussions there. But if you carry a bad gene, for example, for dementia, say, you might work even harder on the lifestyle behaviors that have been shown to impact that in a positive way. So I think there's value in finding that out.
You are correct, Jane, and more we have activities, for want of a better word, or lifestyles that we know can focus on particular diseases, and as you just alluded to. So yes, there's value in knowledge.
Right, and I think from the perspective of the lifestyle medicine that I've trained in, you might want to focus more on specific dietary choices if you're trying to avoid certain things. We've had an observation here that our own Barnstable Adult Center has a lot of programming that's maybe they've read your book, Roger, but it seems to be based on the 10 tips, many of their programs, and certainly their emphasis on getting people together. And the tension between trying to stay safe as we're not sure where the pandemic is going, and yet the need for people to actually get together physically, I think is moving us towards perhaps more outdoors activity, which has the double benefit of getting people out in nature. but the adult center and probably other centers like that, probably Jen's courses, and out of the community college, the Academy of Lifelong Learning has kept people learning and connected. And as much as possible, we're trying to get people back together again.
Yes, it's been quite 2 decades. 2 decades ago, when MacArthur research was just hitting the street, this was, as I said, this started a whole new conversation. It smashed stereotypes, and so, but these last 2 decades, it has been huge, and lifestyle is a major topic. In fact, a recent poll of senior living communities, they intend, 60% of them said that they were going to stop focusing, not they were going to do it, but marketing wise, they were going to stop focusing on care and now start talking about lifestyle, healthy lifestyles for a healthy longevity. And if you know senior living, that's huge, because basically what they've been talking about is care for most of the time that they've been in existence. We'll take care of you, secure, all very nice, and give you granite countertops. Now they're talking about, being connected, being active, meeting people, like-minded people, active people, and continuing to grow. So
yeah,
it's
that's a very good change. My mom was in a senior living facility about 10 years ago, and she hated it. I mean, she chose it. It was her choice because it brought her closer to us. But in terms of not being as active as she wanted to be, and she would even call the residents inmates, because she felt like it was, she was trapped and she wasn't able to get out and be active in the community as she had liked to. So I think as some of us think about that stage, either for ourselves or for family members, it's important to, to keep these issues, these 10 tips in mind, and make sure that you're picking an active center that focuses on keeping people healthy. I wonder if you could just comment briefly in terms of the contrast between preventive medicine and wellness promotion and traditional medicine, and how do you advise people? I try to advise my friends that when they go to see their medical care provider, treat them as a consultant. They're not your boss. If you don't like their advice, maybe you need to research somebody else. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I definitely have thoughts. And there was a whole generation where the physician was king, was their word, whatever it was the altar of medical advice. And that is changing. I do advise people that if your physician, excuse me, ever says to you, well, what do you expect at your age? Say goodbye to that physician, because, it's not being unrealistic or Pollyanna. When our expectations are low, we meet them, as Michelangelo said. And that's the sad part. And we're realizing, William Shatner is, okay, that's a big flamboyant one-off, so to speak, but it is representative of the idea that we can, and hopefully more and more of us, certainly the social determinants of aging and of healthy aging, we're becoming aware of, and we know that poverty and those sort of things are a major factor. But we do know that choices that anyone can make a huge difference in our ability. And so the ability to reach 100 being a going concern, like in the blue zones, that is readily available to all of us. And so physicians who don't realize that, or who don't act as someone who's a cheerleader as well as a consultant, as you say, so that's all very fine, but that's not the kind of medical advice and medical care that I want.
Right. And I tell people, and tell some family members, you are the boss of your life. The physician or the health provider that you're seeing is not your boss. They're your advisor. So I like that comment. We've had other comments that in addition to the adult center, the public libraries have also been fantastic places, both on Zoom and Zoom discussion groups, as well as now returning to in-person to keep people connected at all ages. We've had one comment wondering about how much do you really emphasize nutrition and dietary choices? I know you do have that as one of your 10 tips, and being more towards the Mediterranean plant-based diet, Blue Zones diet seems to be a big component of staying healthy and active. Do you have any comments on how much to emphasize nutritional choices?
We should all be very suspicious of, and we certainly have, any of us who have been following diets for decades now, of the motivation of new diets, and because frequently they'll come from companies with great marketing, and there is a tendency to want to come up with something new, always. But really, when you look at perspective of our species, for 99% of the time that we have been on Earth, really 99%, we were hunter-gatherers. And hunter-gatherers ate a certain diet. What would make you think that we would respond better to whatever the diet may be, low carbs or just low carbs or just eating bark, artichokes or something, than what our ancestors have been eating forever, and we have evolved eating? So the Mediterranean diet, not because it's the Mediterranean diet, but because it is plant-based mostly. It does eat, meat is included, but not much of it, because it really wasn't all that available for most of the time we've been on Earth. We weren't that good at hunting. We were hunter-gatherers, but mostly gatherers until we domesticated animals. And that's a recent thing in our history. So I tend to keep away from certain diets, or any kind of diet really, and stick to the core. The core is about nutrition. It's not about weight. The weight is you deal with lifestyle, moving, and just all the things that we have been talking about. We are fixated on diet, appearances, but we should be focusing on nutrition. And what do we need? We need fruits, nuts, vegetables, wild grains, fish if you like it. Here on Cape Cod, come on, you got to eat it. You're not allowed to live here. and small amounts of meat. That's what we do best on. That's what we're healthiest on. And so any diet that is sort of focusing in that area, that's a great diet.
Thank you, Roger. I think we're just about out of time, but I appreciate that summary. I think that was a good one. Beware of the latest hot diet. And thank you so much for this entire discussion. I think it's been terrific. And I'm going to turn us back over to Bert.
Sorry, Jane, thank you. Roger, thank you. And with that, I will say goodbye to you all. Have a fantastic weekend. Thanks again to our speakers, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Thanks.